The morning rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the city streets into rivers of gray and silver. Danielle Carter pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, the thin fabric doing little to repel the chill that clung to her bones. Her heels clicked sharply against the wet pavement as she approached the towering glass facade of Brooks Emporium, a name synonymous with prestige and luxury. The store's massive windows gleamed despite the drizzle, reflecting the neon signs of nearby shops and the blur of umbrellas rushing past. Danielle's heart beat steadily, a quiet rhythm of determination that belied the exhaustion she felt in every muscle. Today was another interview, another chance to find stability for herself and her 10-year-old son. Caleb, inside her coat pocket, her resume neatly folded, though damp from the rain seeping through the fabric pressed against her fingers. Every line represented not just experience but resilience. Danielle had built her life on discipline, courage, and the quiet knowledge that no one could diminish her worth. Yet, as she approached the revolving doors, a subtle unease threaded through her resolve. The last few months had been a relentless cycle of hope and disappointment. Rejection letters, polite smiles that masked patronization, and doors that had closed before she could even step inside haunted her steps. But she would not allow the weight of failure to define her, not today. The glass doors swished open, and the warmth of the store washed over her like a sudden embrace. Marble floors gleamed under pristine lighting, polished to perfection, reflecting the silhouettes of mannequins dressed in the latest designer lines. The scent of leather and fresh perfume mixed with the muted murmur of customers browsing, creating an atmosphere of calm order, a stark contrast to the storm she had left behind. Danielle's wet coat left faint tracks on the floor, a quiet reminder of the outside world and all its challenges. But she moved with purpose, straightening her posture, head held high. The receptionist gave her a cursory glance and a polite smile. Danielle returned it with measured grace, her lips curving slightly, though the fatigue in her eyes betrayed her sleepless nights. "Miss Carter," the receptionist said, her voice warm but professional, "Mr. Brooks will see you shortly." Danielle nodded and followed the hallway to the manager's office, her heels now a rhythmic metronome of anticipation and resolve. Ethan Brooks's office was everything Danielle had expected, sleek, imposing, and meticulously organized. The walls were lined with abstract art, carefully chosen to signal sophistication and authority. The sunlight filtering through the blinds cut across the floor in sharp, angled lines, illuminating the manager's polished mahogany desk. Behind it sat Ethan, mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with an air of arrogance that seemed to permeate the room. He glanced up from the resume Danielle had handed over, his brow raised slightly, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Danielle placed her damp folder on the desk and smoothed her coat, taking a careful breath. Her posture remained upright, calm, unyielding, even as a quiet storm of emotions swirled beneath the surface. Ethan tapped the resume with a manicured finger.
"You're
ambitious," he said slowly, the word dripping with a mix of amusement and condescension. "But let's be honest, this is a fast-paced environment. We don't usually see single mothers handling schedules like these. Are you sure you're up for it?" The question was not merely a professional inquiry. It was a judgment, an unspoken assertion that she was less capable, less deserving. Danielle felt a twinge of heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not flinch. Her lips curved in a polite, controlled smile. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Brooks," she said softly, her voice steady. "I appreciate the opportunity to interview." Ethan chuckled, a short, dismissive sound that echoed slightly in the spacious office. "Well, good luck then. Honestly, it'll be challenging." He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the polished wood, a faint smirk on his face. Danielle could feel the weight of his gaze, the judgment, but she did not allow it to penetrate the careful shield she had built over years of rejection and resilience. She nodded once, turned, and walked toward the door, her every step measured, deliberate. As she exited, the store's bright interior swallowed her small figure for a moment. But then she emerged into the drizzle outside. The rain had eased slightly, creating a soft haze around the streetlights that reflected off the wet asphalt. Danielle's gaze lifted, not toward the glittering city beyond, but to the small figure waiting for her in the distance. Caleb, his bright eyes searching for her amid the gray. The sight of him steeled her resolve. Every challenge, every scornful glance or dismissive remark existed not for her to absorb, but for her to overcome. The walk back home was a quiet one. Umbrellas bobbed past, muffling footsteps and conversation into a soft background hum. Danielle's mind replayed the interview not with bitterness, but with clarity. Every door closed in her face had taught her strategy, patience, and observation. Every moment of discomfort had honed her awareness, her ability to read people, to anticipate behavior. And now, with the rain receding, with the city's lights shimmering on puddles at her feet, she felt a quiet, simmering certainty. This was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of another chapter. Inside her modest apartment, Caleb ran to her, water droplets streaking his small jacket. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice a mixture of concern and curiosity. Danielle scooped him into her arms, the warmth of their embrace shielding them both from the world outside. "I'm okay, Caleb," she whispered. "We'll be okay?" She set him down, smoothing his damp hair from his forehead. In his eyes she saw hope, innocence, and trust, a mirror of the very courage that had carried her through countless storms. Later, alone in her small kitchen, Danielle poured herself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the cramped space. Her mind wandered to a box tucked in the corner of her bedroom, a small locked container she had not opened in years. Inside were relics of a past life, photographs, documents, and her FBI badge, a symbol of a former world of structure, discipline, and quiet heroism. She ran her fingers over the smooth metal of the badge, feeling the weight of history, of sacrifice, of lessons learned and promises kept. The storm outside had passed, but another, subtler storm was brewing within her, a mix of determination, anticipation, and the quiet hunger for justice that had never fully faded. As the city settled into the rhythm of the day, Danielle sat by the window watching puddles ripple with the wind. Somewhere, across the streets and inside polished offices like Brooks' Emporium, decisions were being made, alliances formed, and secrets whispered. Danielle knew with unwavering certainty that the world was rarely as it seemed. People could laugh, judge, and dismiss, but truth, patience, and resolve carried their own power. Today she had endured a small humiliation. Tomorrow she would begin the work that mattered most, not for the store, not for the dismissive manager, but for her son, for herself, and for the quiet reckoning that had waited patiently for years. The rain had stopped completely now. Sunlight broke through the clouds in slender golden beams, reflecting off the wet streets like molten light. Danielle took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and stepped forward into the bustling city, a mother, a former agent, a woman whose story was far from over. The morning sunlight poured through the office blinds, casting sharp lines across the polished mahogany desk and the sleek, high-backed chair behind it. Ethan Brooks leaned back with casual arrogance, tapping his pen against the desk with a rhythm that seemed almost predatory. Danielle Carter stood across from him, her wet coat now replaced with a neatly pressed blazer, her resume still clutched firmly in her hands. The faint sheen of perspiration on her forehead testified to her nerves, but she held herself with the quiet, unwavering poise that had carried her through countless adversities. Ethan's gaze drifted over the resume again, lingering on her employment history with an air of incredulity. "So you've spent time at various administrative positions," he said slowly, enunciating each word with deliberate disbelief. "And you managed a shelter, I see. That's commendable, I suppose. But retail requires a certain pace. You understand, don't you? Things move fast here. We have high expectations." Danielle's lips curved in a faint, polite smile, her hands resting lightly on the folder. She met his gaze steadily, though her eyes betrayed the familiar sting of judgment. "I understand, Mr. Brooks. I've adapted to challenging environments before and succeeded." Her voice was calm, measured, almost rehearsed, but it carried the subtle undertone of someone who refused to be dismissed. Ethan chuckled, a sharp, almost mocking sound that seemed to reverberate against the walls of the glass-walled office. "Ah, yes. Adaptable," he said, leaning forward now, elbows on the desk. "But let's not kid ourselves. You're a single mother, Miss Carter. That comes with complications, doesn't it? Nights when you're unavailable. Mornings when you're delayed. Honestly, can you keep up with our schedule?" The words were intended to wound, to assert his superiority, and to reduce her to the stereotype he believed her to embody. Danielle's heartbeat quickened, but she did not falter. Instead, she allowed a soft exhale, letting her composure anchor her like a quiet lighthouse in a storm of condescension. "Life comes with complications for all of us," she replied evenly, her tone deliberate, controlled. I manage mine responsibly." Ethan's smirk widened, his eyes narrowing slightly as though he were attempting to dissect her very soul. He leaned back, glancing at two assistants who had stepped into the room for a brief moment, sharing a small, knowing chuckle. The laughter was not loud, but it carried the sting of derision. Danielle felt the familiar flash of heat in her chest, the irritation she had learned to channel into focus. She stood silently for a beat, the calm exterior masking a mind that was already cataloging every word, every gesture, every nuance of the office's layout. Her gaze swept the room subtly, the placement of cameras, the positions of assistants, the angle of the window blinds that filtered sunlight across the desk. Everything was noted, everything catalogued. Years of training, meticulous observation, patient analysis, and quiet anticipation came to life in that moment, though Ethan remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing behind her measured smile. "Ms. Carter, I'll be honest," Ethan continued, oblivious. "We usually hire people who fit our image. Someone energetic, unencumbered, not someone tied down with parental responsibilities." He leaned back again, smirking as if daring her to argue. Danielle placed her resume gently on the desk, her fingers brushing the polished surface with deliberate grace. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Brooks," she said softly, "and I assure you I can meet any expectation." Her voice was calm, but beneath it lay an unspoken promise. The quiet power of someone underestimated. Ethan's smirk faltered slightly, though he did not admit it. Instead, he leaned back further, tapping his pen again, an almost nervous tick he did not recognize. The assistants exchanged glances, sensing a shift, though they could not place it. Danielle's eyes, however, remained steady, scanning the room with calm precision. Every surface, every reflection, every movement of her interviewer was etched in memory. The meeting ended as it had begun, with Ethan rising slightly from his chair and extending a hand with perfunctory politeness. "We'll be in touch," he said, his tone carrying the faintest hint of condescension. Danielle shook his hand lightly, maintaining eye contact, her smile unwavering. "Thank you for your time." As she turned to leave, the laughter of the assistants followed her down the hall, a faint echo of judgment and superiority. But Danielle walked without hesitation, each step deliberate and calm, her mind already mapping the next moves. This moment intended to belittle, to intimidate, had instead reinforced her resolve. She had endured the mockery, catalogued the environment, and maintained control. No one outside her own circle could see the quiet storm of preparation that had been set in motion. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, and the city seemed to exhale with her. Umbrellas bobbed in the reflective puddles, and the faint hum of traffic filled the background. Danielle adjusted her coat, lifted her chin, and walked with a purposeful stride. Today had been a test, and though the world had intended it to diminish her, it had only reminded her of the strength she carried within. At home, Caleb waited by the window, eyes wide with curiosity. When he saw her enter, he ran forward, his small hands grasping her coat. "Mom, did it go okay?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly with hope. Danielle knelt to meet his gaze, brushing the damp strands of hair from his forehead. "It went exactly as it should, Caleb," she said softly. "Sometimes people underestimate us, but that doesn't mean we stop moving forward." The small apartment, modest but filled with warmth, became a sanctuary from the judgment and mockery of the outside world. Danielle placed her coat on the rack, taking a deep breath as she felt the familiar weight of responsibility and determination settle over her shoulders. This day, with its thinly veiled ridicule and quiet tests of character, had revealed much not about her weaknesses, but about the clarity and precision with which she could navigate challenges. Later, alone in the soft glow of her kitchen, Danielle's thoughts drifted to the small, locked box tucked in the corner of her bedroom, a repository of a life long paused, containing photographs, case files, and her FBI badge. The metal gleamed faintly in the dim light as she ran her fingers over it, a tangible reminder of skills, discipline, and experience hidden beneath years of apparent normalcy. Today's encounter had been a subtle test, but it was clear to Danielle that the larger challenge was still ahead, waiting to reveal itself in due course. The city outside continued its morning rhythm, oblivious to the quiet calculations of a mother whose story was far from ordinary. Danielle Carter had faced derision, judgment, and mockery, and yet she remained unshaken. The world believed it had seen her limits. It had not. The lobby of Brooks Emporium was a striking contrast to the storm Danielle had left behind. Polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of the morning sunlight that streamed through towering glass windows. Shoppers wandered between racks of designer clothing, their conversations blending into a gentle hum of ambient activity. Danielle Carter paused for a moment, taking in the opulent surroundings. The store's atmosphere was designed to impress, to communicate success, to subtly remind visitors of their place in the hierarchy of wealth and style. Her gaze lingered on the revolving doors she had just passed through. Inside, the laughter of Ethan Brooks and his assistants echoed faintly in her memory, a sharp reminder of the judgment she had endured. She closed her eyes briefly, drawing in a steadying breath. Despite the sting of condescension, she felt no anger rising within her, only clarity. Every smirk, every dismissive word had been catalogued. Every movement in the office had been noted and analyzed. Danielle knew that strength often lay not in confrontation, but in patience and control. A soft smile curved her lips as she turned toward the glass doors, ready to exit. It was a smile of quiet defiance, one that carried no bitterness but radiated an unspoken message. She was undeterred. Her footsteps echoed lightly against the marble as she moved through the store, past shoppers who barely noticed her presence, past displays of luxury she could appreciate but not covet. Each step was deliberate, measured, a silent assertion of her dignity. The rain outside had begun to lighten, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Sunlight pierced through lingering clouds, casting a warm glow that mingled with the store's interior lights. Danielle's reflection appeared in the polished glass as she passed, showing a woman composed, determined, and resolute. The faint sheen of moisture in her hair, remnants of the earlier storm, lent her a subtle realism that contrasted with the perfection of the showroom around her. As she reached the revolving doors, Danielle paused briefly to glance back toward the manager's office. Her eyes swept over the scene, observing Ethan Brooks and his assistants at a distance, their attention already diverted to the next task, the next visitor. No one suspected the depth of her experience, the knowledge and skill hidden beneath her calm exterior. No one could guess the stories she carried, the quiet power she had honed over years of personal and professional trials. Stepping through the doors, Danielle felt the cool, fresh air of the city envelop her once more. The rain had slowed to a gentle mist, and the sidewalks glistened under the diffused sunlight. She adjusted the collar of her coat, her thoughts already shifting to home, to Caleb, and to the evening that awaited them. Every challenge faced today, every subtle humiliation endured, had strengthened her resolve. The world might attempt to measure her worth, but she knew her value could not be quantified by ridicule or dismissive glances. On the street outside, Danielle's eyes caught the sight of her son waiting patiently by a familiar lamppost, his small figure shielded beneath a bright yellow umbrella. Caleb's gaze met hers, wide and trusting, filled with the simple hope that only a child could carry. The sight filled her chest with warmth, a protective surge that reinforced the quiet power within her. She allowed herself a brief, genuine smile as she approached him, kneeling slightly to meet his gaze. "Mom," Caleb said softly, his voice laced with curiosity and concern. "Did it go okay?" Danielle's smile widened slightly, not with pride, but with reassurance. "Yes, Caleb," she said, her voice steady and calm. "Everything went exactly as it should. Sometimes people underestimate us, but that doesn't mean we stop moving forward." She reached for his small hand, the warmth of their connection, a silent affirmation of resilience and determination. Together, they walked along the glistening streets, Danielle's coat brushing against her leg, Caleb's hand tucked securely in hers. The city continued its rhythm around them, oblivious to the small victories and quiet strength carried by a mother and her son. Every step was a reaffirmation of dignity, of patience, and of the unwavering resolve that would guide Danielle through the challenges yet to come. Later, back in their modest apartment, Danielle placed her coat carefully on the rack, allowing the brief sunlight streaming through the window to catch on her damp hair. She sat by the table for a moment, sipping a cup of coffee, letting the warmth fill her body. Her mind wandered to the small, locked box in the corner of her bedroom, the repository of her hidden past. Inside, her FBI badge rested silently, a tangible symbol of authority, skill, and experience that had remained dormant for years. The day's events had been a minor test, but the larger journey was only just beginning. The smile Danielle had carried through the store was more than politeness. It was a symbol of control, resilience, and quiet foresight. It was the subtle declaration that she would not be defined by the mockery or doubt of others. In that moment, she understood clearly. The world may try to diminish her, but it could not diminish her strength. And tomorrow, when new challenges emerged, she would meet them with the same composed determination that had carried her through the rain-soaked streets that morning. The evening had settled over the city, casting long shadows across the streets and alleys that bustled with the subtle pulse of urban life. Danielle Carter walked briskly through the dimly lit avenues, her coat now dry but still slightly rumpled from the earlier rain. In her arms she carried a canvas tote bag, worn but sturdy, filled with supplies for the shelter she visited twice a week. This was a place of refuge for those who had nowhere else to go, a sanctuary where warmth, kindness, and understanding offered a fragile reprieve from life's harsh realities. The shelter's entrance was modest, a heavy wooden door, paint-chipped at the edges, with a faint sign above that read, Hope Haven. A small bell jingled as Danielle pushed it open, and the faint smell of cooked food and clean linens welcomed her like an embrace. Inside, women and children gathered around long tables, some chatting quietly, others lost in their own thoughts. The fluorescent lights cast a soft, warm glow over the room, softening the lines of weariness etched into their faces. Caleb, her 10-year-old son, trailed beside her, eager to help. His small hands carried a basket of bread rolls, his eyes wide and attentive to the needs of others. Danielle smiled faintly as he distributed the food, observing the subtle gestures of compassion and gratitude exchanged between those she served. Every act, no matter how small, carried significance. Here, in this modest room, she could witness the impact of patience, care, and humanity in its purest form. Danielle moved along the tables with calm efficiency, placing hot meals before each person. She knelt beside a young woman whose eyes were red from crying. "It's going to be okay," Danielle whispered, her voice steady, soothing. "You're stronger than you think, and tomorrow is a new day." The woman's lips quivered, but a faint smile broke through, the first sign of relief she had shown in days. A hush fell over the room as Danielle's presence commanded subtle respect. She was not imposing, nor did she demand attention. Instead, her demeanor radiated quiet authority, calm competence, and a sincere kindness that resonated with those around her. The children, shy at first, gradually warmed to her, instinctively recognizing that she was a source of safety. Caleb giggled as he handed a sandwich to a little boy, who shyly accepted it before darting to a corner to enjoy his meal. Danielle watched him, pride swelling in her chest, not from any personal accomplishment, but from witnessing the spark of compassion she had nurtured in her own child. The back of the room held a small kitchen, where pots clattered gently and the aroma of soup mingled with the scent of freshly baked bread. Danielle moved toward it, checking supplies, refilling bowls, and ensuring that every guest received the care they needed. The task was familiar, comforting in its routine, yet it carried the weight of responsibility she accepted without hesitation. Each small interaction, each act of kindness, was a thread in the invisible tapestry of hope that Danielle had helped weave over the years. Outside, the city's evening traffic hummed faintly, but inside the shelter time seemed suspended. The fluorescent lighting softened the harshness of reality, and the faces of the women and children glowed with quiet gratitude. Danielle felt the subtle tension in her own shoulders ease, the calm of purpose settling over her. This was a world where judgment did not matter, where the facade of social expectation fell away, and where true resilience revealed itself in small gestures and steadfast hearts. As she moved through the room, a child reached for her hand, asking a question about the bread. Danielle knelt, smiling gently. "It's all yours," she said softly, handing the roll to him. Caleb watched, a quiet pride evident in the way he mirrored his mother's gentleness. Danielle's gaze swept the room once more, noting the subtle dynamics, the ways people interacted, the small victories and shared humanity. Even in moments of hardship, there was resilience. Even in lives fractured by circumstance, there was hope. By the time the evening drew to a close, Danielle and Caleb had helped prepare meals for everyone, cleaned the tables, and ensured that each person left the shelter with sustenance and dignity. Outside, the night was calm, the rain fully receded, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of streetlights. Danielle's mind lingered on the small box in her apartment, the repository of her hidden past, and the badge that had once symbolized authority and vigilance. Here, in the warmth of the shelter, she understood that influence and power could take many forms, not just the enforcement of law, but the subtle shaping of lives through compassion, care, and steadfast presence. As she and Caleb walked back to their apartment, the glow of streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, casting long golden lines that seemed to guide them home. Danielle's quiet smile, her steady stride, and the warmth of her son's hand in hers painted a picture of resilience, hope, and unwavering strength, a mother whose story was defined not by the world's mockery, but by the lives she touched and the quiet power she carried within. The apartment was quiet now, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of papers on the kitchen table. Danielle Carter sat at the small wooden table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, the warmth seeping into her palms. Caleb was already asleep in his bedroom, curled beneath a patchwork quilt she had sewn herself, his chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast delicate shadows across the room, illuminating the lines of care and fatigue etched into Danielle's face. She let her thoughts wander for a moment, reflecting on the day, the mockery at Brooks Emporium, the quiet victories at Hope Haven. Her mind felt a peculiar blend of exhaustion and anticipation, a tension that refused to settle. The apartment, modest and warmly lit, was both sanctuary and stage, a place where her dual identities intersected: mother, caretaker, and something else, something far more disciplined and precise. Her phone vibrated softly on the counter, breaking the silence. Danielle's eyes flicked to it, noting the unknown number. A flicker of recognition passed through her expression. She had expected this call sooner or later. The phone's screen displayed nothing more than a simple string of digits. No name, no familiar tone. She exhaled quietly and answered. "Carter," she said, her voice steady, professional, stripped of the day's earlier emotional frictions. "Danielle," a voice whispered on the other end, low and urgent. "We need you. Something has come up. It's time." Danielle's hand tightened around the cup, the ceramic cool beneath her fingers. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through possibilities, contingencies, and risks. The voice on the phone, crisp, authoritative, belonged to someone who demanded attention and obedience. It was a world she had left behind, a life of structure, intelligence, and hidden operations that existed parallel to her public facade. "Detail," she said simply, her tone calm but with an undercurrent of readiness. "Not here. Secure location. Tomorrow, 0800 hours. Come alone," the voice instructed before cutting the line abruptly. Danielle set the phone down slowly, her gaze drifting toward the small box tucked in the corner of the room. The FBI badge gleamed faintly under the soft light, a metallic whisper of past authority and current potential. The world she had walked in today, full of ridicule, compassion, and careful observation, was only a prelude to the storm gathering quietly beyond the city lights. She allowed herself a brief, steadying breath, acknowledging the duality of her existence. One world was visible to all, filled with parenting, volunteering, and daily routines. The other was hidden, precise, demanding, and dangerous. Danielle knew the delicate balance she maintained. One false step, one misjudgment, could expose her true capabilities before she was ready. The evening continued in quiet reflection. Danielle moved to Caleb's room, checking his blanket and gently brushing his hair from his forehead. The child's serene sleep was a reminder of the stakes that guided every action she took, every decision she made. Protecting him was not merely about physical safety. It was about nurturing hope, resilience, and confidence that life, however harsh, could still offer moments of triumph. Returning to the kitchen, Danielle opened the small box, letting her fingers trace the contours of the FBI badge. She had once wielded it as an instrument of authority, a tool for justice and vigilance. Now, it served as a quiet reassurance, a symbol of discipline, intellect, and readiness, qualities that had been hidden, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The call she had received tonight signaled that the moment was approaching. Outside, the city continued its rhythmic pulse. Streetlights reflected off the damp pavement from earlier rain, and distant traffic whispered through the night. Danielle rose and moved to the window, her gaze sweeping the streets below. She was a figure of composed strength, poised between worlds, balancing the delicate threads of her life. The anticipation thrummed through her veins, a low, persistent reminder that change was imminent. that tomorrow would bring the first test of the dual life she had maintained with unwavering precision. Finally, she returned to her chair, coffee now lukewarm, and allowed her mind to drift over plans, contingencies, and possibilities. Every detail mattered, every observation counted. Danielle Carter had faced mockery, challenge, and judgment today. Yet it was this hidden life, this quiet readiness that would define her next steps. The city outside remained unaware of the storm quietly gathering in the apartment, the calm before a tide that would soon surge. The early morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Danielle Carter's apartment, painting soft gold stripes across the worn wooden floor. Outside, the city was just beginning to stir, the distant hum of engines, the occasional honk, and the faint murmur of pedestrians blending into a low, constant rhythm. Danielle sat at the kitchen table, the FBI badge resting before her like a silent judge, weighing her next move. The weight of the previous night's call pressed heavily on her mind, each detail replaying with deliberate intensity. Caleb stirred in his bedroom, unaware of the storm his mother faced internally. Danielle glanced at the door, a flicker of worry crossing her composed face. He deserved stability, consistency, a mother who would always be there. And yet the call had been urgent, unmistakable, something significant, something that required her attention and expertise. She ran her fingers over the badge, the cool metal grounding her thoughts. Years ago, this badge had represented authority, discipline, and vigilance. Now it was more than a symbol. It was a reminder of the skills and experience that had been carefully tucked away, waiting for a critical moment. Her gaze drifted to the window where the soft light illuminated the quiet street below, reflecting puddles from last night's rain. The city looked peaceful, ordinary, unaware of the life-altering decision unfolding inside this small apartment. Danielle's thoughts spiraled briefly, weighing consequences. She could ignore the call, remain fully present for Caleb, and continue her quiet life of resilience, compassion, and survival. Yet, a part of her trained, precise, disciplined, knew that hesitation could mean missed opportunity, or worse. There were lives, missions, and truths at stake, and she had the ability to act. The decision was more than personal. It was professional, ethical, and necessary. The kitchen clock ticked softly, a subtle metronome marking time and urgency. Danielle exhaled, a long, deliberate breath, letting the calm of preparation settle her racing mind. She rose, moving toward the small box tucked in the corner of the room. Opening it, she removed the FBI badge once again, holding it in her hands as though drawing strength from its presence. Each contour, each engraved line reflected years of training, sacrifice, and vigilance. A sense of resolve began to settle over her, firm and unwavering. She would go, not recklessly, not without planning, but decisively. This was her calling, a path she had walked before, and the world would benefit from her skills once more. Danielle carefully placed the badge back in the box, locking it with a quiet click that sounded louder than expected in the stillness of the room. She turned toward Caleb's bedroom, where the soft rise and fall of his chest reminded her of what was truly at stake. Kneeling at his bedside, she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and whispered, "Mommy has something important to do, but I'll be back soon. Always remember that you are brave, strong, and loved." Caleb mumbled softly, half asleep, trusting in the calm certainty of his mother's voice. Danielle's heart swelled with the quiet courage that had sustained her through countless storms, both visible and hidden. By the time she had prepared a small bag with essentials, water, documents, and discreet tools of her past trade, the apartment was bathed in warm, golden light. Danielle paused, looking once more at the badge, then at the streets beyond the window. Every step she would take was measured, deliberate, and grounded in both strategy and moral clarity. She was a mother, a former agent, and a woman whose life required balance, precision, and courage. As she left the apartment, locking the door behind her, Danielle felt a subtle shift within her. The day ahead would be challenging, demanding both intellect and intuition, but she walked with confidence, her stride steady, her mind sharp, her heart resolute. The city outside, unaware of the hidden narrative about to unfold, stretched endlessly ahead, streets gleaming from rain, people moving through their routines, life continuing in unassuming cadence. Danielle's gaze lifted toward the horizon, where sunlight pierced the morning haze. Every challenge, every judgment faced in the past, had prepared her for this moment. The decision had been made. She would answer the call, not for recognition, not for glory, but for justice, duty, and the quiet power she carried within. And in that resolve, Danielle Carter stepped forward into a day that would change her life and the lives of others forever. The early morning streets glistened under the faint remnants of rain, the city still quiet as Danielle Carter moved with purposeful precision. Her coat hugged her shoulders, her hair neatly arranged, and her expression composed yet alert. The urgency from the previous night's call had settled into a focused determination, guiding every step. Today, the hidden part of her life, the disciplined, trained operative, would emerge from the shadows of motherhood and routine. She reached a nondescript building in a side street, its facade weathered and gray. No signage marked its presence, just the faint hum of activity within. Danielle approached cautiously, observing subtle details, the placement of cameras, security patrols, and the angle of windows catching the morning light. Every observation was catalogued, every potential risk assessed. She adjusted her coat, hiding the small bag of essentials against her body, and took a deep, steadying breath. Inside, the building was dimly lit, corridors narrow, walls lined with peeling paint and muted shadows. Danielle moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had operated in far more dangerous situations. Her steps were deliberate, the soft click of her shoes against concrete echoing slightly in the otherwise silent hall. At the end of a corridor, a door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 30s, suited, professional, yet tense. "You must be Danielle," he said, extending a hand. His voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of urgency. Danielle shook it firmly, her eyes scanning the surroundings even as she acknowledged him. "I am," she replied. "I received your call." He led her through a narrow hallway into a small, secure briefing room. A digital map of the city illuminated the wall, displaying pins, markings, and routes. "We've had a development," he said, his tone clipped. "There's an operation underway that requires immediate intervention. Your experience makes you essential." "You understand the stakes?" Danielle nodded, absorbing the details with methodical precision. Her training, honed over years of discipline, allowed her to process vast amounts of information rapidly. Maps, logistics, potential risks, every piece became part of a coherent mental strategy. She didn't flinch, didn't question, and didn't hesitate. Action and analysis were intertwined seamlessly in her mind. After receiving the briefing, Danielle moved to gather necessary tools, reviewing secure communications devices, documentation, and discrete identification she might need. Her calm exterior masked the quick calculations running through her mind, timing, approach, contingency plans. The stakes were high, but she had never been unprepared. Her mind wandered briefly to Caleb, the thought of his safety sharpening her focus. Every move she made now was precise, every decision weighted by experience and moral clarity. Outside the briefing room, Danielle paused, placing her hand on the cool metal of a railing. The city beyond the building windows reflected morning light in shimmering patterns, oblivious to the covert actions about to unfold within its streets. The contrast between the calm exterior and the tension inside mirrored Danielle's dual-life mother and operative, nurturer and strategist, guardian and investigator. As she stepped into the vehicle that would transport her to the operations site, Danielle reviewed the plan once more. Each step had been outlined meticulously, and she felt a quiet confidence in her preparation. Her eyes scanned the city streets passing by, noting potential obstacles, alternative routes, and subtle changes in environment that might impact the mission. The first assignment would test every skill, every ounce of patience, observation, and decisiveness she had cultivated. Danielle Carter was ready. The city moved around her unaware, shadows lengthening as the morning light shifted, and a quiet anticipation built within her, a low hum of tension and readiness. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where her hidden expertise intersected with urgent necessity, and the first threads of suspense and action began to weave together. The streets were quiet, the early morning fog clinging to the edges of the city like a soft veil. Danielle Carter moved with purposeful steps, her coat buttoned tightly, bag slung casually over her shoulder. The mission required discretion, observation, patience, and a keen eye for details that most would overlook. Her every movement was calculated, subtle, almost invisible against the ordinary backdrop of commuters and early traffic. She arrived at a small cafe tucked into a narrow side street. Its faded sign swung slightly with the breeze, and the faint aroma of brewed coffee mingled with the damp air. Danielle took a seat at a corner table, her back angled toward the entrance. She observed silently, noting the patrons' behaviors, the patterns of the baristas, and the subtle shifts in foot traffic outside. Each detail was catalogued, each movement a potential piece of intelligence. Across the street, a man in his late 30s, dressed in dark clothing, paused to glance at the cafe. Danielle recognized the signal subtle, deliberate, an indication that he had noticed her presence. She adjusted her posture slightly, her expression calm, controlled, betraying no hint of recognition. Inside, her senses sharpened, the faint tapping of a laptop key, the scent of pastries, the quiet rustle of newspapers, each sensory cue a layer of context that added to her awareness. A server approached, asking for her order. Danielle responded politely, her tone soft but precise, eyes never leaving the street. She requested a simple black coffee, her focus never wavering from the target. Her presence blended seamlessly into the environment, unremarkable, ordinary, yet fully aware of every detail. The man across the street finally entered the cafe. Danielle's eyes flicked briefly, confirming identity and noting behavioral cues, posture, gait, subtle nervous tics. She allowed a faint, polite smile, a gesture that seemed casual to any observer but carried strategic subtlety. Every micro-expression, every fleeting glance, was a part of her analysis data to be stored and recalled at the precise moment it would matter. Minutes stretched into a quiet tension. Danielle sipped her coffee, maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Patrons came and went, unaware of the silent intelligence gathering occurring at the corner table. The man she was tracking moved closer to the back of the cafe, settling at a table adjacent to a window. Danielle's trained eyes caught the brief flicker of a concealed device in his hand. Her pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. Every second counted. From her bag, Danielle retrieved a small notepad, jotting subtle details, time, position, and observed behavior. The city outside moved in muted rhythm, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding within its streets. Danielle felt the familiar surge of anticipation, a low hum of focus that sharpened her senses without betraying emotion. She was calm, precise, patient, the operative hidden behind the veneer of a mother running errands, drinking coffee in the early fog. Suddenly, the man glanced up, eyes scanning the room. Danielle shifted slightly, maintaining natural posture, her expression relaxed. The moment was brief but charged with tension. Both were aware of the other's observation, yet no direct acknowledgement passed between them. Danielle's mind catalogued every subtle cue, preparing for the next phase of the encounter. The server returned with her coffee, the clink of the cup breaking the brief tension in the air. Danielle thanked the barista softly, taking a sip without losing focus. The encounter, though outwardly mundane, had tested her awareness, patience, and ability to blend into a normal setting while remaining fully alert. This was the essence of undercover work: observation without detection, action without exposure, and strategy executed with flawless subtlety. As she prepared to leave, Danielle noted the man exiting the cafe, moving with purpose into the city streets. Her mind replayed the encounter, extracting every nuance, every behavioral cue, every detail that might guide her next move. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the glistening streets and the bustle of morning activity. Danielle walked with measured steps, her presence calm, her mind alert, and her resolve unshakable. The city around her remained unaware, but she was ready, a shadow moving deliberately through light, poised for the unfolding mission. The afternoon sun had begun to filter through the city's misty skyline, casting long, dappled shadows across the streets below. Danielle Carter moved silently along a narrow alley adjacent to the cafe, her coat brushing lightly against her legs, bag slung securely across her shoulder. Every sense was alert, every detail catalogued. The events inside the cafe had already provided a glimpse into the network she was investigating, but Danielle knew that nothing was ever as straightforward as it seemed. Ahead, she spotted the man. From the cafe slipping into a warehouse, a hulking, steel-framed building that seemed abandoned to the casual observer. Danielle paused, noting security cameras positioned at the entrances, faint motion sensors blinking intermittently, and a small group of men milling near the back doors. Her pulse remained steady, her mind moving through contingencies with the precision of a practiced strategist. She crouched briefly behind a stack of crates, observing. From her vantage point, Danielle noticed a familiar insignia on one of the men's jackets, a symbol she recognized from years of prior intelligence work. It was subtle, easily missed by anyone untrained, yet it carried immense significance. A chill ran through her spine, not from fear but from the gravity of discovery. The organization she had encountered years ago, thought dismantled, was alive, operating under a new guise, and now directly in her path. Danielle's thoughts raced, briefly to Caleb, the delicate balance between duty and motherhood sharpening her focus. Every step forward carried risk, every miscalculation could have catastrophic consequences. Yet, she did not hesitate. She recorded the scene in her mind, cataloging entry points, guard positions, and environmental conditions. Every shadow, every glint of light on metal, every subtle shift in posture became data. From her bag, Danielle retrieved a discreet pair of binoculars, scanning the men inside the warehouse. Her eyes caught a brief exchange of documents, the kind of movement that indicated something far larger than a local operation. Her jaw tightened, slightly the subtle sign of a mind assessing both threat and opportunity. She had expected a routine mission, a controlled observation, but what unfolded before her eyes was a revelation that threatened to reshape everything she knew about the network's scope and ambition. Suddenly, one of the men turned, pausing near a window. Danielle froze instinctively, heart steady, mind precise. The man's eyes scanned the alley, his posture suggesting suspicion. For a fleeting moment, tension escalated, a silent acknowledgement that someone was watching. Danielle held her breath, lowering herself slightly behind the crates, blending into the shadows. Her camouflage was impeccable. Her experience allowed her to disappear in plain sight. The man moved on, oblivious, and Danielle exhaled quietly, maintaining her focus. She continued her observation, noting a series of encrypted devices being transferred among the men. This was more than smuggling or petty crime. It was organized, coordinated, and dangerous. Danielle's mind calculated potential outcomes, tracing pathways of influence and exposure. The revelation was undeniable. The organization was far more sophisticated than intelligence reports had suggested, and its objectives could have far-reaching consequences. The warehouse doors closed with a faint clang, and the men began to disperse. Danielle remained in place a moment longer, absorbing every detail, committing faces, movements, and symbols to memory. She understood that her next moves had to be precise, deliberate, and swift. One wrong step could compromise months of observation, or worse, place her directly in danger. As she melted into the foggy streets, Danielle felt the familiar surge of anticipation, a mix of adrenaline, strategy, and quiet determination. The city around her continued its unassuming rhythm, but she carried within her the weight of knowledge and the clarity of purpose. The unexpected revelation had changed the game, elevated the stakes, and reinforced the necessity of patience, observation, and calculated action. Back at a safe distance, she paused briefly to review her mental notes. Every movement had been recorded, every detail catalogued, and every risk assessed. Danielle knew that this was only the beginning of a larger, more dangerous mission. The network she thought dismantled had resurfaced, and her expertise was now indispensable in unraveling its layers. The evening had draped the city in a cloak of deep indigo, streetlights casting golden pools on the slick pavement. Danielle Carter moved with calculated precision, her footsteps silent against the wet asphalt. The alley leading to the secondary entrance of the warehouse was deserted, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. Every sense was heightened, every nerve attuned to the subtle shifts in the environment. The confrontation she had anticipated was now imminent, and her focus sharpened like a blade. She crouched behind a stack of wooden pallets, scanning the area with the sharp, analytical gaze of a seasoned operative. Inside the warehouse, muffled voices and the occasional metallic clink echoed faintly through thick walls. Danielle noted the positions of two guards near the side door, their casual movements betraying overconfidence. Her mind calculated the approach, timing, angle, and contingency plans, every possible scenario considered, every risk minimized. A faint breeze carried the scent of oil and rust from the warehouse machinery. Danielle adjusted her position slightly, ensuring her silhouette remained hidden against the shadows. The man from the cafe, the key link she had been tracking, emerged briefly from a back doorway, his movements confident, yet oblivious to her presence. Danielle's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled, each heartbeat measured. This was not fear, it was disciplined anticipation. She moved quickly and silently, slipping past the first guard while keeping him in her peripheral vision. The second guard remained distracted, and Danielle used the brief window to slip inside the warehouse. The interior was vast, dimly lit, filled with crates, scattered machinery, and the subtle hum of concealed activity. Shadows played across the walls, creating a shifting maze of light and dark. Danielle's eyes scanned quickly, committing every face, movement, and object to memory. Ahead, the man from the cafe stood near a table covered with documents and devices. Danielle approached, using crates and machinery as cover, her body low and movements deliberate. Her voice, when it came, was calm but commanding. "Stop!" The man froze, startled, scanning the room to locate the source. Danielle stepped into view, badge in hand, a quiet authority radiating from her posture and tone. The moment was tense, charged with potential violence, yet under Danielle's control. The man's expression flickered between surprise and recognition. "You—" he began, but Danielle held up her hand subtly, silencing him. Her eyes locked on his, unwavering, unflinching. Every detail she had observed, every movement, every micro-expression now worked in her favor. Two other men noticed the confrontation and reached for concealed devices. Danielle reacted swiftly, precise and calculated, neutralizing the immediate threat without excessive force. Her training had honed every reflex, every decision into a seamless flow of action. Within moments, she had established control over the scene, her presence alone commanding compliance. The man from the cafe, now subdued, looked at her with a mixture of fear and respect. Danielle stepped closer, her voice low, calm, yet edged with authority. "You underestimated me. That was your mistake. Tell me everything now." The tension in the warehouse was palpable, every individual aware that Danielle held the advantage and that her patience had limits. Outside, the city continued unaware, streets glistening under the fading light, while inside, Danielle orchestrated the confrontation with precision and clarity. Her mind catalogued responses, gauged sincerity, and prepared for the next phase of investigation. The unexpected revelation had led her to this moment, and her careful observation, patience, and skill now ensured that she remained in command. The confrontation was over in minutes, not hours. Danielle had established dominance, extracted critical information, and maintained control without unnecessary aggression. Her focus remained sharp, her mind attuned to every subtle shift in behavior. The network's operations had been partially exposed, and the first step toward dismantling it had been executed flawlessly. As she exited the warehouse, the city's evening air felt cool against her skin. Danielle walked with measured strides, the weight of success tempered by the knowledge that the mission was far from over. Shadows stretched across the streets, and the fading light mirrored the duality of her life operative and mother, strategist and nurturer, silent observer and decisive actor. The confrontation had tested every skill she possessed, and she had emerged unscathed, ready for the challenges yet to come. The warehouse had grown silent after the confrontation, shadows lingering in the corners like muted witnesses. Danielle Carter stood near the central table, her FBI badge glinting faintly in the dim light as she reviewed the documents and digital devices seized during the operation. Each file, each note, and each encrypted message held pieces of a puzzle, fragments of a network far larger and more dangerous than she had anticipated. Her fingers moved deftly, scanning lines of code, patterns of communication, and financial records. The network's sophistication was staggering. Shell companies, hidden accounts, falsified identities, and encrypted channels all intertwined to mask operations from conventional detection. Danielle's mind, trained over years of fieldwork and investigation, parsed the data with meticulous precision. Every anomaly, every subtle irregularity became a clue pointing toward the larger structure. She leaned closer to a laptop, her eyes narrowing as she decrypted a particularly challenging file. Names, dates, and locations flashed across the screen, revealing connections that had eluded prior intelligence efforts. Danielle's pulse remained steady, but a quiet intensity filled the air, the thrill of discovery tempered by the weight of responsibility. This was the moment when information transformed into actionable insight, and Danielle's expertise became indispensable. A small folded note fell from one of the folders. Danielle picked it up, recognizing the handwriting immediately, a signature she had encountered years ago during a previous operation. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she read, understanding instantly the implications. The network's reach was global, its influence pervasive, and the stakes were far higher than anyone outside her knowledge could imagine. The revelation was both exhilarating and terrifying. It confirmed what she had suspected, but added layers of complexity she had not fully anticipated. Danielle's mind raced with possibilities, each scenario more intricate than the last. The network had contingency plans, backup systems, and hidden redundancies designed to withstand conventional disruption. But her approach was different, patient, calculated, and adaptive. Every step she had taken, every observation recorded, and every detail noted in the field now coalesced into a coherent strategy. The secrets revealed today were the first threads of a plan that would unravel the network systematically. Her eyes flicked to the man from the cafe, now restrained and under observation, who watched her silently. His expression betrayed frustration and unease, knowing that Danielle had gained the upper hand without unnecessary force. Every micro-expression, every slight change in posture, was catalogued by Danielle. She understood that human behavior was as revealing as the documents themselves. The hum of the warehouse equipment and distant city noises provided a backdrop for her focus. Danielle moved between the seized materials, cross-referencing notes and compiling connections. Each discovery illuminated a facet of the organization previously hidden, gradually revealing the structure, hierarchy, and objectives. Her patience and diligence turned raw data into clarity, and the weight of the network's secrets no longer seemed insurmountable. By the time the operation concluded, Danielle had mapped significant portions of the network, identified key operatives, and traced the flow of critical information. The confrontation had yielded more than compliance. It had provided knowledge, leverage, and insight. Outside the warehouse, the city moved obliviously, unaware that within these walls, the groundwork for dismantling a sophisticated criminal network had been laid. Danielle paused, taking a moment to reflect on the unfolding narrative. The secrets revealed today were not merely information. They were opportunities to prevent harm, restore justice, and exercise the skills and authority she had honed over decades. Her gaze shifted briefly toward the envelope containing her FBI badge, a reminder that her dual-life mother and operative required balance, discretion, and unwavering resolve. As she prepared to exit the warehouse, documents secured, devices cataloged, Danielle's mind was already several steps ahead. The network's secrets had been revealed, but the mission was far from complete. The path forward demanded strategy, patience, and decisive action. With every revelation, her resolve strengthened. She would see this through, not only for justice, but for the countless lives unknowingly affected by the organization's covert operations. Night had fallen over the city, the streets glimmering with reflections from streetlights and neon signs. Danielle Carter moved quietly through a narrow alley, her coat pulled tightly around her, bag slung discreetly over one shoulder. The operation required meticulous preparation strategy. Timing and subtlety were paramount. Every move she made now had to be precise, calculated, and deliberate. She arrived at a small, unassuming safe house, a building that blended seamlessly into its surroundings, offering anonymity while serving as the command center for her next steps. Danielle stepped inside, the faint click of the lock echoing slightly in the otherwise silent space. Inside, the room was sparsely furnished, a large table covered with maps, laptops, and a series of documents outlining the network's structure, personnel, and operations. Each item was strategically placed for clarity and efficiency. Danielle removed her coat, setting it neatly on a chair, and began to review the compiled data. She traced routes on the maps with a pencil, connecting locations, identifying vulnerabilities, and plotting contingencies. Her mind worked with analytical precision, cataloging threats, timing, and potential responses. Every detail mattered: the positioning of guards, timing of shifts, security cameras, and even the subtle patterns in the network's communication flow. A soft beep from a laptop drew her attention. An encrypted message had arrived, containing confirmation of the final piece of intelligence needed for the operation. Danielle read the message carefully, analyzing its content, cross-referencing with existing data, and noting potential risks. Her expression remained calm, composed, yet focused, reflecting the depth of experience and discipline she carried from years of fieldwork. She paused briefly, glancing toward a photograph on the wall, a picture of Caleb asleep beneath his quilt, serene and unaware of the challenges his mother faced. The image reminded her of the stakes, grounding her purpose and reinforcing her commitment. Protecting him, while dismantling the network, required balance, focus, and unwavering resolve. Danielle methodically packed a tactical bag with essential tools, documents, and communication devices. Each item had a specific purpose, each placement intentional. She checked and double-checked her equipment, ensuring readiness for every possible scenario. Her training had taught her that preparation was not merely precaution, it was the key to control, confidence, and success in high-stakes operations. Once ready, Danielle moved to a large map pinned on the wall, tracing her planned route with precise, deliberate movements. She visualized every step, entry points, exit strategies, safe zones, and contingencies for unexpected encounters. Her mind cataloged potential threats, considering both human and environmental variables. The setup was complete, every detail aligned, every risk accounted for, and every opportunity mapped. Outside, the city's rhythm continued unabated. Traffic flowed, neon lights flickered, and the distant hum of nightlife echoed faintly through the streets. Danielle Carter, however, operated in a parallel rhythm, one dictated by strategy, observation, and a deep understanding of timing. The stage was set for the decisive action that would follow, and she moved with quiet confidence, the weight of preparation resting firmly on her shoulders. As she stepped outside the safe house, the night air felt crisp against her skin. The mission was ready to unfold. Danielle's mind remained sharp, her body poised, and her resolve unwavering. Every element of the setup had been executed with precision, ensuring that the next phase would be carried out efficiently, effectively, and decisively. The network's exposure had provided clarity, and the calculated setup had created the conditions for control, leverage, and ultimate success. The city was cloaked in darkness, the faint glow of streetlights creating elongated shadows on the wet pavement. Danielle Carter moved with calculated precision, her coat pulled tight against the chill, bag slung securely across her shoulder. Every step was deliberate, silent, blending seamlessly with the rhythm of the city's nocturnal pulse. Tonight, the operation she had meticulously prepared for would finally commence. She arrived at the perimeter of the network's hidden facility, a nondescript industrial building surrounded by fences and dim floodlights. Danielle crouched behind a stack of crates, observing security patrols, camera rotations, and potential blind spots. Her trained eyes noted every detail: the timing of the guards' steps, the subtle shifts in their postures, and the rhythm of the surrounding environment. Each observation fed into a mental map, forming a strategy for infiltration and execution. Using the shadows for cover, Danielle moved silently toward the entrance. Her movements were fluid and precise, a blend of stealth, anticipation, and disciplined focus. She checked her tactical devices, ensuring communication lines were secure, and confirmed the location of key targets within the facility. Every precaution had been taken, every variable considered. There was no margin for error. Inside, the facility hummed with activity, a stark contrast to the quiet exterior. Men moved with purpose, unaware of Danielle's approach. She navigated the corridors with careful steps, her senses attuned to every sound, every flicker of light, every subtle cue. A faint metallic scent filled the air, blending with the distant hum of machinery. Danielle's pulse remained steady. Her mind catalogued every element with precision. At a central control room, Danielle observed the flow of information across multiple monitors. She recognized critical files, communication channels, and operational nodes, the hub of the network's activity. Her fingers moved quickly, efficiently, extracting data, creating temporary access points, and documenting everything for further analysis. This was the culmination of careful observation, intelligence gathering, and strategic planning. Suddenly, a shadow shifted near a doorway. Danielle froze instinctively, assessing the potential threat. A guard emerged, unaware of her presence. With practiced subtlety, she moved behind him, neutralizing the threat silently and efficiently. Every action was controlled, precise, and intentional, a demonstration of skill honed over years of fieldwork. Throughout the facility, Danielle continued her methodical approach, navigating corridors, documenting operations, and neutralizing minor obstacles without detection. The tension was palpable, Yet her composure never wavered. Every step, every movement, was part of a broader strategy designed to dismantle the network systematically. Outside, the city remained oblivious, streets quiet under the cloak of night. Within the facility, Danielle's presence was a silent force, unseen yet undeniably effective. Her mind operated in tandem with her training, balancing observation, action, and foresight. Each piece of intelligence she gathered brought clarity. Each interaction solidified control, and each measured step advanced her toward the operation's ultimate objectives. By the time Danielle exited the facility, the first phase of the operation had been executed flawlessly. Data, evidence, and strategic insight were secured, and the network's immediate operations had been disrupted. The city's quiet streets greeted her as she disappeared into the night, shadows and light dancing across wet pavement. Danielle Carter's resolve remained unshaken. The operation had begun, but the mission was far from complete. The night's work was only the first chapter in dismantling a network built on secrecy, deception, and hidden power. The facility had been disrupted, data secured, and Danielle Carter felt a brief surge of satisfaction as she exited into the quiet night. Yet, instinct and experience warned her that success rarely came without complication. The streets were slick from earlier rain, reflecting neon and streetlights in fragmented patterns, but Danielle's focus remained sharp. Every shadow, every sound, every flicker of movement could signify danger or revelation. As she moved through a side alley toward her extraction point, her earpiece crackled with an unexpected message. The voice was calm but urgent, delivering information that made Danielle freeze for the first time that night. "Danielle, the target isn't who we thought. He's connected to someone from your past." Her mind raced. Years of experience had trained her to anticipate deception, but this hit closer to home than any field operation had before. The man from the cafe, previously assumed to be a minor operative, was revealed to have ties to a former adversary, someone who had once jeopardized her career and her life. The revelation reframed every observation, every interaction, and every calculated move she had made that evening. Danielle slowed her steps, recalibrating her approach. The earpiece continued, "You need to reassess. He's not acting alone. He has leverage that could expose your cover. Move cautiously." The warning amplified the tension already coursing through her veins. The operation was no longer just a tactical mission. It had evolved into a personal challenge, blending her professional expertise with unresolved shadows from her past. She ducked into the shadow of a building, scanning the streets for any sign of surveillance or unexpected activity. Her mind cataloged possibilities, potential traps, double agents, or hidden accomplices. The man she had confronted could have allies within the facility or outside it, ready to strike, manipulate, or escape. Every detail she had gathered moments ago now required reevaluation in the context of this new information. Danielle's pulse remained steady, but the weight of personal stakes added intensity to her focus. This was no longer just a professional challenge. It carried echoes of past encounters, unresolved conflicts, and personal risk. She adjusted her tactical bag, checked her communication lines, and reviewed mental notes of the facility's layout. Preparation, precision, and patience would determine whether the night ended in success or compromise. A sudden movement across the alley drew her attention, a shadow shifting with intention, steps deliberate and calculated. Danielle crouched slightly, her eyes narrowing, recognizing subtle behavioral cues that indicated the presence of an observer. This twist, unexpected yet revealing, had elevated the stakes and required immediate adaptation. Every instinct, every training exercise, every prior experience converged in her mind, guiding her next actions. The man from the cafe appeared briefly in the distance, flanked by an unfamiliar figure. Danielle's heart maintained its steady rhythm, yet a surge of adrenaline sharpened her focus. The twist was clear. The operation was far more complex than anticipated, entwined with personal history, hidden motives, and potential exposure. She took a measured breath, allowing strategic calm to guide her next move. Her fingers brushed the edge of her FBI badge tucked inside her coat, a silent reminder of authority, experience, and preparation. Every decision from this point forward required perfect timing, clarity, and execution. The twist had arrived, reshaping the mission, heightening suspense, and setting the stage for the final confrontation. Danielle moved forward with controlled precision, blending into the shadows, her mind calculating every scenario, her body poised for action. The network, the adversaries, and her past converged in a single night of tension and revelation. The twist had elevated the stakes, and Danielle Carter was ready to meet it head-on. The city skyline glimmered under the pale glow of the moon, reflecting off wet streets and casting long shadows across deserted alleys. Danielle Carter moved with quiet precision, her coat pulled tight, tactical bag secure, and mind focused entirely on the final confrontation. Tonight was not just about strategy, it was about justice, closure, and protecting the life she had built alongside her son, Caleb. She arrived at the hidden rendezvous point, an abandoned warehouse at the city's edge. Its rusted doors creaked slightly in the wind, a subtle warning to any who might underestimate the environment. Danielle crouched behind a stack of crates outside, observing the figures inside through slats of broken boards. The man from the cafe and his unexpected ally were there, flanked by 2 additional guards. The twist from the previous scene had elevated the stakes. This encounter required flawless execution. Taking a deep breath, Danielle drew upon years of training and experience, blending patience, awareness, and tactical skill. She waited for the perfect moment, calculating timing, angles, and contingencies. Then, with precise and deliberate movements, she slipped inside the warehouse, shadows cloaking her approach. Her presence was silent but commanding, every footstep controlled, every motion intentional. Inside, tension thickened. The adversaries noticed subtle shifts in the shadows but could not identify the source. Danielle revealed herself, FBI badge held with quiet authority. "It's over," she said, her voice calm yet commanding, echoing slightly in the cavernous space. The men froze, uncertainty and recognition flickering across their faces. The confrontation escalated quickly. The unexpected ally lunged, but Danielle reacted with trained precision, disarming and subduing him without unnecessary force. The guards attempted resistance but were neutralized with controlled movements, minimizing risk to herself while maintaining authority. Every action demonstrated mastery, combining strength, intelligence, and discipline honed over years. The man from the cafe, now cornered, realized his leverage had vanished. Danielle stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "All of it ends tonight," she said firmly. His attempts at negotiation faltered. Every micro-expression betrayed the truth. Danielle held control, knowledge, and authority. With careful coordination, she secured the remaining evidence, ensuring that the network's operations could no longer continue unnoticed. As the adrenaline of confrontation settled, Danielle's thoughts drifted briefly to Caleb. The personal stakes had merged seamlessly with professional responsibility, reminding her why each step mattered. She had acted not for revenge, but for justice, protection, and closure. The experience had tested her patience, skill, and emotional fortitude, but she had prevailed. Exiting the warehouse, Danielle breathed deeply, the cool night air cleansing the tension from her mind. The city's streets shimmered under the moonlight, oblivious to the dramatic conclusion that had just unfolded within the warehouse walls. Danielle walked with measured steps, calm yet alert, embodying the balance between mother, protector, and operative. Back at her apartment, she found Caleb asleep, serene beneath his quilt. Danielle quietly placed the FBI badge on the nightstand, a symbol of the life she had temporarily set aside to protect others. She knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead and whispering, "We're safe now." Her heart swelled with quiet satisfaction. The resolution of the night's events mirrored in the safety and innocence of her child. The city moved on, streets alive with routine and oblivion, while Danielle Carter carried the weight of justice, experience, and moral clarity. The twist, the danger, and the suspense had culminated in resolution, the network dismantled, adversaries subdued, and personal stakes secured. Danielle's dual-life mother and operative had intersected with precision, courage, and unwavering determination, leaving her ready for whatever challenges awaited in the days to come. The night ended not with fanfare, but with quiet triumph. Danielle's story of resilience, intelligence, and decisive action had reached its conclusion, leaving a trail of justice, closure, and inspiration in its wake.